recording to the cloud, and I just had a little mishap here, and I'm hoping that the mishap will not be lethal. Because I have been reading from this point for number 10. We'll have to see whether anything I did before really worked. I think the safest thing to do is to begin recording number 10 again, and then if I'll always say it differently, of course. 010A, and I'll read what he says and try again, and then maybe I'll include them both, you know. I earlier told you that as the race achieves increasingly a mental polarization, which is maybe more a mental focus, as mental polarization occurs between the second and third initiation, but the race will eventually achieve that through developing the attractive power of the mental principle. And that sounds very Venusian. That sounds like we're dealing with the higher mind, and that part of the higher mind we call the soul, or the vehicle of the soul, the causal body, or the egoic lotus, that the use of language for the conveying of thoughts between equals or of communicating with superiors will fall into disuse. Already Master DK is a telepath, but he has to use language for us, and in the future when we become efficient telepaths, we will have to use language to communicate with those who are not there yet, who are up and coming. It will continue to be used in reaching the masses and those not functioning on the plane of mind, which is a necessary thing, of course, and hopefully the demagoguery by which some reach the masses and which is focused on the exploiting the glamours of the astral plane will be banished. Hopefully that will be the case. Already voiceless prayer and aspiration and worship are deemed of higher value than the pleadings, verbal, and proclamations, verbal, of voiced expression. So maybe we have some experience with voiceless prayer. It's a type of a higher communion, we might say, and it's an alignment with the higher sources of power in such a way that those beneficent energies can really make a more impressive impact. So it's for this stage of unfoldment of the race for which preparation must be made, and the laws, techniques, and processes of telepathic communication must be made plain so that they can be intelligently and theoretically understood. And Master DK has made a very good start with the instructions to the telepathic group, or the group attempting to uncover their own natural telepathy. We all have it, you know. So that is a method of helping this seed group work to get started. It's really hierarchical work, working out as an expression a very limited expression thus far on the outer plane. The method of communication between members of the hierarchy is a tenfold process. It doesn't mean you have to go through 10 stages to become telepathic. It just means there are 10 different modes or subjects of the usual communication, and that the outer groups are substanded by a much more powerful and hierarchically directed inner groups. And only the contribution of the 10 groups, the seed groups, you know, the 9 and the synthesizing 10th will share in the externalizing process. Or will their share in the will their share in the externalizing process as it is to take place in the world be completed. So DK never was able to organize all of those groups because the Second World War came in, but it is a 275-year project, and probably that tells us something about its beginning in around 1925, and its first phase conclusion around 2200, still 180 years from this point. So, you know, the telepathic communicators, 1, the trained observers, 2, the magnetic healers, 3, the educators of the New Age, 4, the political workers, 5, the religious workers, 6, the scientific workers, 7, the psychologists, 8, the economists, 9, and then the synthetic group, 10, you know, made of 27. 3 from each of the 9 groups, 24 students. It's a shambolic number. 24, the number of hours in a day, is a shambolic number, as is 6. And this has added to it the 3 very experienced, deep occultists. Maybe they're called teachers, but they're more than that. They are experiential guides to the 24 students in the advanced schools, plural, as there will be 7 of them. So 10 different modes of communication based upon 10 inner powerful groups, represented at this time simply by little fledgling groups on the outer plane, gradually taking shape, and not easily so. From certain angles, the work of the second group, the trained observers, is exceedingly hard, well, perhaps harder than that of any other group, except that which is engaged in political work. We have a very astral Buddhic solar system, and our solar logos has taken the second initiation. Our planetary logos has not, and is therefore faced with many of the glamours which have to be confronted before the second initiation can be taken. But even so, the astral plane remains very powerful because of the orientation of our, and the ray structure of our solar logos. So it's the only unified plane, the astral plane, in the dense physical body of the planetary logos. And other than that, we have division on the mental plane between a 3 above and 4 below, and division on the etheric physical plane with 4 above and 3 below. But the astral plane is unified and therefore powerful, and therefore the undesirable phenomena associated with it have a harder time subsiding. We have a harder time conquering those phenomena phenomena because of the power of the astral plane. After all, we live at this time within a solar logos, the great macrocosm for us, which has a second-ray personality, a second-ray soul, which it will, I think, retain, and probably a fourth ray on its way to second-ray monad, or maybe those are the two monadic rays if the great beings have two monadic rays, as I expect the lesser beings like the human being to have. So it's very soft line and therefore brings power to the astral body. But the political workers also have a tough time. And so we'll look at that. I hope you don't mind, like I say, if I find that the program I was working on still somehow exists, and there's no telling whether it really does, then I'll include both of them, because one always says something a little different, though I am trying to remember at the moment what it is I did say. It's really tough when a little disconnection with a chord causes so much difficulty. And it looks to me like something happened here. And that, in fact, it does exist, but not very not a very long program, 18 minutes. Well, maybe yep, it does exist. Okay, well, I'll include that. But, I discover I'm saying some different things here anyway. So it's probably not a bad thing to do both. I've often found that when these mishaps happen to me, the second time through seems a little bit more intelligent, if you will, than the first time through. So maybe I should always make such a mistake, Anyway, the first ray political workers have a tough time as well. It's a difficult group to be part of. Our solar logos has rejected a lot of the possible impact of the first ray in this particular second major solar system, because that solar logos is working on the consciousness aspect. At least that's how DK describes it. So it occultly rebuffs a great flow of the first ray. In the next solar system, it will be different. So in the latter field of work, the work of the first ray of will and power is beginning to make its presence felt. Well, the true will of God is not yet come through, and it is a noble thing, he says, or I think the word is noble or something like that, to be an agent for the imposition of the will of God, or the divine will. So it's just beginning to make its presence felt in the political field. We have a lot of political desire. The question is, do we have real political will? So, and hence the great difficulty. The energy which works out in political activity is not yet understood. And we understand that the disciples of Shambhala are so easily misunderstood and so easily hated Some of them simply have a contact with Shambhala, and you wonder whether they are really disciples of Shambhala at all. You know, was Hitler a disciple of Shambhala, or did he simply use an inversion of its energy? Maybe Stalin was a disciple of Shambhala, and Franco, he says yes, and Ataturk certainly. But in the case of Stalin, you know, it's a little bit of the gray there. And he was a ruthless man, and I think responsible for many more deaths, even within his nation, than Hitler was within his nation, which is not to excuse the monstrous quality of Hitler's approach, far worse than Stalin's in a way. Anyway, the energy which works out in political activity is not yet understood. The work of the destroyer aspect has been kept relatively in the background. And only during the past half century, let's say from 1850 to 1950, or 1847 to 1947, but approximately from the center of the 19th to the center of the 20th century, only during the past half century has it become definitely active. Well, we had something the Romantics did not anticipate, We had the rising of blood and iron. We had in Germany, under Bismarck, who was a kind of avatar of materialism, counterbalanced by Lincoln, who was a great racial avatar on behalf of the Great White Lodge. So the first ray really came in the latter part. You could tell with the synthesis of the many sort of regions within Germany, making of it a nation. And you could tell about the synthesis factor in the 1860s, which I'm sure aided Lincoln, a real lesser avatar of synthesis, as it were, to do all he could to hold the Union together, even though in our present age, people of far less scope of consciousness are doing what they can to sever it and divide its personality from its soul, pandering to its personality. This is definitely a Martian activity, and the horoscope of the main individual involved shows Mars rising in the egotistical sign Leo. Whereas Lincoln, was a great Aquarian from that perspective. And there have been other Aquarians too that have brought their gifts in that way. Let's see, the Franklin Delano Roosevelt, an Aquarius with Virgo rising. Lincoln, an Aquarius, I believe. I tested it with Sagittarius rising and a lot of Capricorn energy. Even, Barack Obama recently, one never knows from a historical perspective how the reputation of these people will play out, but he apparently had Aquarius on the ascendant. So that correlates with the soul ray, the soul sign of the United States. Bismarck, on the other hand, looks like he had Leo rising, and that's the opposite. And it can be a very materialistic sign and promotes egotism. So Aries, Leo, and Capricorn were his major signs, Sun in Aries, and Leo rising, and the Moon in Capricorn. It's a little bit of a digression, but some work was done, I think, by Philip Lindsay, who pointed out the prevalence of the Capricorn moon in those who either prepared the way for Nazism or who were active in the Nazi era. And Hitler himself had that Capricorn moon with a strong Leo in his soul horoscope, I guess. It's quite different from Aquarius. In Aquarius lies our hope for the coming age, but in a sense, it's also Aquarius Leo, the age of Aquarius Leo, because as Dane Rudhyar, that famous astrologer, said, there's no such thing as a stick with only one end. You know, it's Aquarius Leo. It has been Pisces Virgo. Before that, it had been Aries Libra. You know, the opposites play into any equinoctial age. So anyway, the work of the destroyer aspect has been kept, it sounds deliberate, relatively in the background, and only during the past half century has it become definitely active. And this became possible because the whole world, practically speaking, was involved. It was a world war, and only in the region or realm of synthesis can the first ray function. Now that's quite a demanding statement and fairly enigmatical. Maybe those are the two statements about which DK says are contained in this paragraph, and that we would overlook them, of course. This is a point to be remembered, he says, and one that is little grasped at as yet. Only in the realm of synthesis can the first ray function. So it must have functioned very well for Lincoln in a positive sense, as synthesis was the factor that allowed him to really hold the Union together. I mean, his influence was very strong. And negatively speaking, Bismarck also synthesized the many fragments into a German nation, but under the impress of blood and iron. Mars, of course. And Mars is a non-sacred and divisive planet, ruling all that cuts one thing from another. So he synthesized his own nation, but he sought to distinguish it from other nations as the greatest of all nations, you know, Deutschland über alles, and eventually gave way to the Nazis, who conceived of their nation in that manner. The peculiar thing is, after the war, they became divided for a long time and only recently have regained their unity, probably as the fourth ray soul of Germany was emerging, and not the first ray in its divisive nature, the first ray personality. Anyway, we don't grasp this yet. Only as a result of synthesis can the first ray really function. I wonder if you can appreciate the importance of the two statements anent the first ray found in this short paragraph. He doesn't even identify what they are, and I had a little trouble finding them, and maybe have not. I often give you so much real information of which you remain oblivious. As at some point, he does say that the average aspirant is really quite stupid and dull, you know, and he's having a moment of truth there. Maybe the first statement is that the first ray could enter because the whole world was involved. It sounds like an aspect of what he's saying about synthesis, but because everyone was involved, everybody, you know, really worldwide, It would be hard to find a remote place on Earth that was not involved. Could it be Antarctica? I don't know. Every place we can name, in the Americas, in Europe, in Russia, in Africa, in Australia, New Zealand, throughout Asia and so forth. They were all involved. And this meant, again, that the first ray could come in. So the first statement seems to be that the whole world was involved, and thus the first ray could enter. And then the second statement is a principle that only in the region or realm of synthesis can the first ray be involved. If you can find another sentence here that will constitute one half of the two that he says are found, more power to you. Well, maybe in politics that the first ray is only beginning to make its presence felt, and then will be a sign of difficulty because of the imposition of the will. The imposition of the will ever summons difficulty to the surface. It may lead to excellent results, but at first, the other ray structures don't like to have that will imposed upon them. No. Okay. So I say this is about as far as I got in my accidentally curtailed program when the Ethernet just slipped out of the computer. And then a bit more here. The second group is wrestling with glamour and the processes of light and their relation to group glamour and to individual glamour form a very close connection. Well, basically, we are constantly dealing now in our various glamour groups with the technique of light. So you use that technique when dealing with glamour, and the technique of inspiration, I think, when dealing with Maya, and the technique of the presence when seeking to dispel illusion. So this is thus the tech TCHN of light. So right illumination, which is another name or aspect of right direction, will take place. I mean, when we can see where we're going, and we can take the right direction. When we don't have light, how in the world can we discern what is the right direction for us? And that's why we seek out wise people, wiser than we are, to help us see in the greater light they have generated. So direction and illumination go hand in hand. Direction and illumination go hand in hand. And all of this, in that light we shall see light. We use what light we have to see a greater light, and the greater light helps to indicate the path that we must take if we are to proceed in the right direction. And that even, takes us as far as the great choice to be made at the sixth initiation. Have we chosen the right direction? The Buddha did not. The most understandable sin of the Buddha is involved there. He was so compassionately involved with humanity that he chose the path of Earth service, which, being a Taurus too, Earth being so related to Taurus, that was not his path at all. And that brings us to the idea that in the next solar system, it won't be like this one. Right now, the third aspect gets in the way of the flowering of the second. Intelligence gets in the way of the flowering of love, especially when the intelligence is selfish. In the next solar system, love will get in the way of the flowering of the will. I know it's hard for us to imagine, but I suppose it has something to do with prolonging attachment when the will would have us move forward, in the energy of progress onward, and the straight line kind of action, which is rapid. No, instead we would hug to ourselves the old forms, and we would not progress because of our sensitive attachment to the old forms. Well, it's going to be a long time before we have to worry about that, because if we're halfway through this solar system, lasting approximately 300 trillion years, trillion has 4 sets of 3 zeros, 311 trillion, 40 billion years, and then we have to go through a period of pralaya, which is just about as long or as long as the manifestational period. We could still be, well, wild guess, but we could still be 450 trillion years away from the next solar system. I realize it's a figure that's all out of comparison with what modern science says, but at the very least, let us say that modern science deals only with the externalized universe, not even with the entire cosmic physical plane. It just deals with the very lowest part of the systemic planes, the dense physical, and maybe a little bit of the ether, systemic ether, now being penetrated. It has a long time to go before it will deal with astral phenomena and mental phenomena, and finally with the scientific discovery of the soul, and then the cosmic ethers have to be penetrated. That could take a long time. So this sometimes estimate of 15 billion years for the duration of the universe, our universe, it probably has more to do with the duration of the outermost rind of our present universe. So are those Brahmanical figures correct? And does the universe really last, at least ours, well, not a universe, but the solar system really last 311 trillion years and 40 billion? Well, all we have is Madame Blavatsky's assurance that the Brahmanical calendar is correct. So anyway, illumination is an aspect of right direction, and these will take the place of glamour, because with glamour you get all confused and you wander into the swamp following the false light. In German it's called Irrlicht, which is like the marsh gas, the light of the marsh gas. It leads you astray into the swamp. And the objective, personally considered, of this group of disciples is to bring light into dark places and illumination into their lives. Well, there are going to be always dark places, relatively, in the field of the evolving consciousness. And what seems light and illumined at one moment is shown later to be a rather dense darkness, and on so it goes, with light ever intensifying. But these people, the trained observers, recognizing that that which observes is ultimately the monad, and secondarily the triad, which is an extension of the monad, and the egoic lotus, which is a further and more densified extension. Those are higher observers than the normal low personality consciousness, though there is a stage where you can recognize yourself as the soul in incarnation, and you separate yourself as an observer, belonging more to the world of soul than to the world of personality. So working on identifying the observer and identifying as the observer, see, first identification is telling what it is. And second identification is acting as if one is it. We identify as the observer that we have, whose identity we have defined. It is not my intention here to deal with the problem of glamour. With that, I've already concerned myself, he says, in the instructions to this group. Wonderful little book, and it seems to have so much more than just the story of glamour in it. It takes a good crack at illusion and at Maya as well. So the term glamour is being used in a broader, generic, general sense. The task of this group of disciples is closely connected with the astral task of the hierarchy. I guess it has a mental task and a etheric physical task. This is at this time the dissipation of the world illusion. The astral plane is the greatest plane of illusion, and there we're using the word illusion generally and not specifically referring to the misunderstandings that occur when we use only the concrete mind to interpret the teaching. So the astral task of the hierarchy, what is that? I suppose, you know, really to make the whole astral plane disappear, but, or at least the astral formulations upon the plane of sentiency. You can't eliminate the type of matter that is found on the plane and in the subplanes of sentiency, which we usually call the astral plane, because then there would be a discontinuity between the mental plane and the physical, and we're told that magicians have died because of this discontinuity caused by insufficient protection from the Agnisurians, you know, devas of the astral plane, who basically drain off the waters and make death the only viable eventuality. So the magician can drown, but the magician can also have all the waters extracted, and then a discontinuity appears between mental and etheric. Okay, the astral task of the hierarchy. That astral task is at this time the dissipation of the world illusion, and there, of course, the idea that the astral plane is the greatest plane of illusion at this time. Because our solar logos is emotionally polarized still, and because the astral plane throughout the solar system is the least divided and most whole of all the other planes. Mental plane is divided 3 above 4, and the physical plane is divided 4 above 3. etheric 4, and 3 for the systemic dense physical level of gas, liquid, and solid. Okay, well, it's not really solid, but it's the greatest congestion of matter. So it looks very, very solid. Okay, so the astral task, the dissipation of world illusion, that has been its problem since Atlantean times, times of the Great War, you know, and the climaxing of its effort is imminent and immediate. Well, from what I understand, it will be necessary to dissipate the Maya before one can do a thorough job of, or at least disperse the Maya before one can do a better job at dissipating the glamour. Okay. So, nevertheless, relatively speaking, in relative time, the long-term project of hierarchy to dissipate the world illusion is coming right up. It takes the form, for all illusions take to themselves form of some kind or other, and so often what we call amorphous or formless still has a kind of form. Takes the form of the pouring in of light, esoterically understood, the pouring in of the power which reveals, correct? This is an illusion and at the same time a great and significant spiritual fact. So how's that for an enigmatic statement? The pouring in of light, which is an illusion from one perspective, and also a fact, a spiritual fact. Okay. Hence, we have today upon the physical plane the emergence of much light everywhere. Interesting, as you're flying at night, you know, and you look down and the various cities are illumined areas, maybe circles, maybe not, but they are separated from other illumined places by darkness. So we have darkness all around and these uprising of the places of light, the cities, the towns, and so forth. Hence, we have today upon the physical plane the emergence of much light everywhere. You know, Edison was the inventor of the incandescent bulb. He was obviously a fifth ray soul. And, you know, Venus is involved, Venus, the great lighted planet. So he was one who was bringing great tangible light to the world. But the inner light, of course, is what's very important to remove the pall of ignorance from the consciousness. So going on, we have festivals of illumination and a constant endeavor on the part of all spiritual workers to enlighten mankind, and a great deal of talk on the part of the educators anent illumination of a mental kind. So light emerging everywhere, and this was, you know, some 70 years ago that this was written. So what is the story now, huh? So light emerging everywhere. Okay. Yeah. So, going on. Hence, we have today the emergence of light, a far more illumined world. And the more advanced the civilizations, at least in the technological sense, when you look over the light grid, which is found spread all over the world, those places are the most illumined. The great cities in the United States, in Europe, I suppose in China, Russia, South America, the great cities, they are the ones that are producing the most illumination. It's been an amazing world, to over the last 100 years, the last century, a bit more, to bring so much light to the world. Think of it. Gas lights, maybe we had, but not much. And now the electric incandescent bulb has come in, bringing floods of illumination. The technological improvements of our society have really reflected and not yet entirely, the advanced technology of Atlantis provided by the leaders of the Atlantean race, not by the people themselves who were still relatively in a state of ignorance and astral polarization, even as today that Atlantean consciousness of astral polarization persists. So anyway, everywhere, more light. Even the dark light of Shambhala is coming in. It's only dark or black because it's so bright we can't penetrate it with our present organs of vision. So we have, says the Tibetan festivals of illumination and a constant endeavor on the part of all spiritual workers to enlighten humanity, use this energy of light to bring into recognition that of which so many human beings have not been aware before, subjected to light. Maybe light itself is in a way invisible, but on the other hand, everything that is revealed by light is, at the lowest level, condensed light. The entire universe is, in a way, condensed light, light and condensed light, condensed at different levels of intensity. So the mysteries of light, we've penetrated a few since the scientific revolution, but there's so many more things to learn about what light really is, especially the light of the inner planes. So we have festivals of illumination and a constant endeavor on the part of all spiritual workers to enlighten mankind. Are we trying to do that? I think so. When we have materials such as the Tibetans' work, well, we have something that for the vast majority, for the bulk of humanity, something that has not been brought to light. It might as well not exist as far as the bulk of human beings imagine. It's beyond the pale. And the more childish solutions to what reality is are in vogue, but they are gradually being challenged simply by scientific discovery. So there's a great deal of talk also on the part of educators anent illumination of a mental kind. If we illuminate the astral plane properly, well, we will help to overcome the many glamours that hold us in thrall. When we illuminate properly the mental plane, I hope I said astral before that, I meant astral before, and if we illuminate the mental plane, we will strike a blow at those misinterpretations which characterize the world illusion. The whole universe is illusion from an ultimate metaphysical perspective. Okay, the keynote of this effort to eliminate world glamour was sounded by Christ when he said, following the example of Hermes, thrice great Hermes, who initiated the process of enlightenment for our race, the Aryan, I am the light of the world. And that must have been long ago, as Atlantean times were coming to an end, or at least the overlap period was occurring. Long ago, as the Atlantean period was ending. So really, who was Hermes? Sometimes we think, well, he was the master R, but I tend to think that Hermes was a much more advanced soul than that, and that the master R is very closely related, you know. Whatever the emerald tablets were, that green color is Hermes color. And Hermes has lent his name to the mysteries, which are called the hermetic initiations or hermetic initiation mysteries. And it has to do with the idea of silence about the various grades that it is possible to achieve. Much trouble can result when one speaks of these things in an unauthorized manner. So, disciples must learn the significance of illumination received in meditation and the necessity to work with light as a group for the dissipation of glamour. Now that's what we are, you know, attempting to do in our various groups dedicated to such processes. There are many, really, you know. DK gave the book out, pretty much the instructions to this group that we're talking about right now, and lots of different people and their groups have taken up the indications in that which was, you know, finally published as a book and not just as lesson sets. So we don't yet really know how to work with the light, but we know more than we did before. All right. Hermes and Christ undertook this work of astral enlightenment and are constantly occupied with this task. Well, Hermes, it appears, is still around. Maybe, you know, part of the path of Earth service, who knows? Might be. And the Buddha too, you know, he's the Lord of light and the Lord of wisdom, and whether he said it or not, he certainly could say, I am the light of the world. Those three great light bringers, Hermes, the Buddha, and the Christ, could say that and mean it and know its meaning. And we too have to be able to do the same. So their work in the New Age is to be aided by the intensive activity of certain groups, of which this second group is one. So we little human beings out here, we are helpful in executing the hierarchical intention in a small way. We are light bringers, we are light bearers, we are light carriers, and we reveal a world which has always been there, of which we are becoming increasingly certain, and of which others to whom we speak may have no idea at first. They don't know that these things really exist. They know there are mysteries to the kingdoms of heaven, or maybe they just consider it to be one heaven, whereas in occultism, there are many heavens at different points of tension. So they, probably conceive of heaven as being a very lighted place, but they don't realize how many progressive heavens there are. I guess St. Paul did. He talked about the third heaven as it reflects the seventh. Maybe the seventh heaven, which usually means euphoria and, oh, I'm so happy, really means life upon the logoic plane at the seventh initiation. So they're constantly occupied with this task of bringing more light into the astral plane. And the Buddha too, whose sign is very much Taurus, the second sign, would find himself astrologically related to the illumination of the glamours which must be eliminated. There's something about Taurus and the second initiation which is a strong connection, and Scorpio too, which of course is the sign most associated with the second initiation, but Taurus should not be left out of the picture. Okay, so here are Hermes, and here is the Christ. I don't think that the Tibetan is hinting at the idea that the Buddha was Hermes. I don't think so, because the rays are different. And thrice, the number 3 is so hermetic in that sense, and is having to do with the externalization of the mysteries, and the color green, which is the third ray color. So who is this great initiate Hermes? It seems like he's still here and still at work. And I think he very much influenced the Egyptian mysteries. He influenced Egypt, which was the root of much of what we call Masonry today, and Masonry works under the Hermetic principle of secrecy. Probably the seventh ray is much involved in the Hermetic outpouring, as it is in Masonry. Rays 1, 4, and 7, particularly involved in Masonry. Their work in the New Age is to be aided by the intensive activity of certain groups, of which this second group is one. So we're going to help with the dissipation of glamour, and especially the group of hierarchical initiates interiorly helping the outer group, and then there will be a precipitation onto the outer plane of some of the inner group, and the conquest of glamour will proceed, though, as I said, probably later than the clearing and cleansing of the etheric fields, the various veils, as they temporarily block the higher energies from coming through. The veils of impulsion, distortion, separation, and aspiration. So the work in the New Age is to be aided by the intensive activity of certain groups, of which this second group is one. Later, when the new civilization is nearing appearance, I guess maybe the new culture has to work interiorly first, these groups will all have in them two key persons or points of energy, which will, through which the forces of Hermes and the will of the Christ be focused. The Christ is now exemplifying the great use of will under the influence of the avatar of synthesis, and how interesting that the influence of Hermes as the new civilization unfolds will be represented in the new groups by one even more connected with him, with whoever Hermes is now, than with the Christ. So it's two. These groups will have in them one representing Hermes and one representing the Christ. Okay. When this takes place, the task of dissipating the world glamour will be much more rapid than it is today. It's immediate in a way, but that's only relative immediacy. There may still be, a few centuries involved in this before this more efficient mode of dissipation can occur. When this takes place, the task of dissipating the world glamour will be much more rapid than it is today. In the meantime, groups of disciples can nurture and conceal, thus protecting from trouble the germ or seed of the new Aquarian culture and civilization along this particular line of freedom. Again, I repeat, they must do this along with other groups working along similar lines, either consciously or unconsciously. I mean, when the groups working on the dissipation of glamour can really be mutually helpful to each other, then we have considerable progress and development. When will it be? And will the discovery of Vulcan, a very illuminating planet, I think, even though it has so much will, so close to the sun as to be very bright in a way, will Vulcan have been discovered? Because after all, Taurus is the mother of illumination, and illumination is needed to dissipate the glamour. And the sign Taurus is much associated with Vulcan, its esoteric and hierarchical ruler, and Taurus is associated much with the taking, or the working on and taking the second initiation. So we're talking about achieving lines of freedom here. Okay. I'm just going on a little bit more, we have a bit more to go. Again, I repeat, they must do this along with other groups, no separatism or separativeness. When we're all working on the same thing, even if our methods are a little different, we cooperate and we mutually reinforce each other. So that's spreading the light and getting rid of glamour as this second group functions. The astral task of the hierarchy. And some people, having a lot of 6 ray, are very inclined to work this way. The sixth-ray type is always searching on a great quest for what it considers to be reality, usually some sentiently perceived state rather than meticulously thought out the way the third ray, aided by the fifth, might do. But still aiming high, and aiming ultimately towards the monad. The sixth ray, the sense of smell, the monad. That's what is in process. Okay, now there might be a little more here, and I wanted to complete that problem that I had through the disconnection. Don't let your antikarana get disconnected, you know. Otherwise, you may have to reboot, and the lights may go out for a while. Let's see what we have here and how long it lasts. Well, I think it might be better not to do this. This takes us to page 40 or 39. Just to read the first sentence. The second task of this group of disciples is to act as a bridge for forces which are seeking etheric expression and which emanate from soul levels. You know, there is a sense in which the soul ray impresses the physical body, and I suppose the etheric, rather the personality, the personality impresses the physical body, and the etheric. Doesn't mean the soul does not, but there's a correspondence there from the personality to the etheric physical body, from the soul to the astral body, and from the monad to the mind. So the second task of this group of disciples is to act as a bridge for forces which are seeking etheric expression and which emanate from soul levels via the mind. So from soul to mind and even through the astral, and then finding its way to the etheric and thence the physical. And he starts with the illusion of the astral plane. I have earlier pointed out in a treatise on white magic that the astral plane is itself an illusion. And that's a hard thing to grasp because, in a way, the matter of the astral plane, or the plane of sentiency, is not illusory, but the forms that have been made with that matter. And as a result of impressing that those atoms of sentiency, they are illusory. So we must distinguish between the stuff, the substance, the matter of the astral plane, and that which has been constructed from it, which leads astray the true seeker. Well, I think we've gone far enough. We're on page, I think, 39. Yep, we're on page 39. And we started at 37. Yeah, there we go. So pages 30, 39. I think so. Okay. Just to keep the record a little bit straight. Now, I don't know who will have the time to really study this, but let's just say that our studies in this manner give us at least the opportunity to delve in depth into the material rather than just, as we say, just reading it. I'm sure a lot of us have read many of the books or even all of the books, but have we pondered as we went along? That is the question, because only with this dwelling upon, with this brooding upon, waiting for the hatching to occur, are we really getting the most out of what we stop to ponder. So I'm going to take this down to as far as we have gotten. Right. So let's see what this really says about groups of disciples is to act consciously or unconsciously. Group of disciples is to act, and what we're going to have to do there is just try to trace it a little bit and see what we can come up with, because something disappeared. So, yeah. Group of disciples is to act, and there are two of them. And let's see, here it is. And basically, the second task of this group of disciples is what we should be saying. You know, when things disappear, you can't get them back so easily. Second task of this group of disciples is to act. Okay, well then we're on page 39, and we'll begin with, this has been the end of 10 AA, 010 AA, because of the error I made, and we'll be going into 011A. Today has been the 4th of July, and I'm not sure anything more can be done right now, and we'll see when it can be done. Okay, friends, now my hope is that even with Mercury retrograde, technology has not baffled me. So this is we'll get into the second task. And the first task, you know, somehow is to learn to work with light in imitation of Hermes and the Christ. So let's see if I can do this without, no, that's incorrect. Okay. So first task is to learn to work with light in emulation of Hermes and the Christ. You kind of wonder why the Lord of Light is not there, and then you're led to say, well, what about Hermes? Was he an earlier incarnation of the Buddha? But the rays are not correct, even though they both would have the ray 3 monad. DK in Cosmic Fire, I think he says the Buddha and 9 others can put in triple appearances, and that is the prerogative of the 3rd ray monad, and it's just obvious that Hermes, at least in one of his monadic rays, maybe both, has to be the 3rd ray monad. When I'm talking about 2 monadic rays, I'm talking about the ray as it demonstrates within the temple of Ezekiel on the monadic plane, and then the ray, it could be any one of the 7, and then the ray of the liberated monad, which can only join the circle of the Father, the Son, or the Holy Spirit or Holy Ghost. Okay, friends, so that'll be it, and maybe an hour and 15 minutes or a little bit less. And the other program was 18 minutes. But if you want to listen to it, maybe I've said something different. I think so. So I'll stop the recording, and you'll be sent, or it will be posted on Makara, both of these programs, 010A and 010AA. Okay.